bedroom windows. Scary. But they are taking out cement slabs. It was hilarious on Friday. I was watching them because I don't know the names of construction equipment. Call them diggers and that's little. But front end loader maybe it has a giant scoop on the front. Anyway, he was there waiting for the little forklift, and the forklift he got the cement, and he was like, and then he went over to the front end thingy, and he was trying to lift it up. I was like, oh, get your forks back, buddy. He goes, and he got it. Well, then he's trying to put him into the bucket thingy, and he got him in, but then the bucket was, and it was hilarious. It was like a very long time until they finally got it coordinated and got it loaded. I was like, ooh, balance. Anyway. Or grandma helping out grandpa. I don't know if that actually works. Or anybody pull like a U-Haul trailer behind a van or something. And how do you, anyone know, now this is not my knowledge, it was imparted to me from someone wiser than I, how you would load a trailer that you're taking down the road?
You want to put all the weight either on top of or in front of the axle and keep it stable
Yep.
and make the balance more
Yep.
on the coverage.
Very good. And do you know right or left on United States roads generally?
Right.
That matters.
You want to put weight on the
Correct. So generally our roads are kind of crowned a little bit. So you want to put weight on the left side so it, yeah, helps it not turn over. Anyway, someone described that to me and I'm like, well, that makes sense. Anyway, so that's your free knowledge for today. So your resource is the same, and did anyone dive into the weight and balance handbook for the terminology? So today, I threw a ton of terminology at you on Friday. Now we're going to take that and build on that. So it's going to be review, reinforcement, and dive into theory. So how do we use those things? So does anyone remember when we talk about weight and balance, what does the FAA consider as the primary reason for weight and balance? I gave you a little hint. Safety. So safety is our key word. Primary purpose is safety because aircraft will become unstable or even unflyable when their center of gravity moves beyond the limit. So either too far forward or too far aft, it will crash. Now, a secondary reason, this is not the primary, but it's still important, although not the most important. Secondary purpose is efficiency. So, when you have your center of gravity in limits, the airplane flies more fuel efficiently and is easier to control. So, if we are a little too nose heavy, so our center of gravity is a little too far forward, maybe we got lucky and we have a long runway we could still take off, but the nose is going to want to do what if our CG is too far forward? It's going to want to go down. And so what does the pilot do to compensate for that? Pulls back on the elevator, so now this is up to pull my nose up, and this is a little broken. And so now we're flying like this. What's that doing to drag? Increasing drag. So to get our desired airspeed, what do we have to do? Increase power. So now we're burning a lot more fuel. Very inefficient flight. That's just one example. The top picture, I did write it down. if our center of gravity is too far aft. They took off. What do you think may have happened? We don't know.
Stall.
Yep. Because he couldn't get the nose down to run out of lift and stall crash. Yeah.
Aside from pilot error and mechanical issues, would you say that weight and balance mistakes are one of the leading causes of GA crashes?
That's a good question.
I feel like almost every NTSB report I read,
Yes.
GA is weight and balance is incorrect. It's not.
I know it is very common. I don't know if it's one of the most common.
Yeah. Loss of control is the number one killer.
Right.
No matter which.
And
There's
if
two
it,
different ways that can happen.
Right.
Or two at the same time.
yes. Yes. So it, yeah, could be part of something they do. Yeah. And it would be pilot error if they load it incorrectly, or mechanic error if they do what I'm going to be teaching you incorrectly. Yeah. Yeah. We talked about aircraft flying and crashing. Weight and balance can go bad on the ground as well. So, large airliners need to be loaded and unloaded in a correct fashion. Anyone know anything special about our 414? Some of you have, yeah. Yes. So if you have any passengers in the back, before you get the pilot in the front, you've got to have a tail stand. And the Kodiak is actually that way too. So if you, hopefully, I'm going to have some with it in the spring again this year, but they have a tail stand they put under it. Otherwise, if the pilot gets out and there's any weight in the back, boop, it's on his tail. So this one was actually unloaded incorrectly. They started unloading the front. It still has stuff in the back. Oops! Somebody! Now, working at McDonald's? So, all the things we are going to talk about kind of fit into these three categories. So these are the three primary elements or ways to look at weight and balance. So there is weighing the aircraft, putting the aircraft up, placing it on scales, getting the, what kind of weight would it be called? Empty weight, and generally nowadays we would be basic empty weight. How is basic empty weight different from standard empty weight?
Basic empty weight is full engine load.
Very good. And how is it different from standard? Yes.
If you change something on the aircraft, it'll include that bill.
Correct. So,
Factory.
yes, updated equipment, different from how it came out of the factory. And then licensed empty weight, how is that different than basic empty weight?
Doesn't include your oil.
Correct. Only undrainable engine oil. Anybody remember the year that
78.
beautiful. So weighing the aircraft. And then another big factor is maintaining the weight and balance records. Because, here's a little tidbit, if you don't have records, then that plane is not what? Not airworthy. Can't fly. And then proper loading of the aircraft. So that includes how do you load it? Do you load the front first or the back first? How much do you load it? How do you document the loading? And what would happen if somebody tried to load it incorrectly? A bunch of stuff that we'll talk about with that. So you may be wondering, probably not, but I'm going to pretend that you are. What all sorts of documents or sources of data do we have for just, you know,
Or
4313. Yeah, yeah. What else?
Did you count like previous records at the time that everything was weighed as like weight balance documents for like
Exactly. Weight balance records of the aircraft, yes. There's two more. The one you should get, the other one pilots should get. That's great. Besides that.
Maintenance manual.
Yes, maintenance manual. Someone said POH, which is good. What do you actually need in your aircraft as a pilot?
Operating manual.
Yes, your aircraft flight manual. So, very good. Got TCDS, aircraft flight manual, weight balance records, maintenance manual, AC 4313. So, TCDS, I printed this out and I grabbed the 210. We're going to go through some of the things that are on it a little bit later. But it will have, so I call this is, actually, Dean would call this is Mama. Mama says what's on her baby. So TCDS says this is what makes this airplane airworthy. So it will have things like center of gravity limits. It will have where the datum is, how to level the aircraft, maximum weight, how many seats, where should the seats be, throwing this stuff at you, we're going to go over it in detail later. Fuel capacity, oil capacity, all that stuff, TCDS. Then we have these two things. Now, we do not have the POH, the 210, so this is 185, don't let it throw you off. Just take a big picture of this little thing. So this low book is bound, and it is a POH. Now we have, might seem like a duplicate, the operating handbook, but it is a 3-ring binder that you can take things out and put things in. This is the aircraft flight manual that must go with the aircraft, specific to the aircraft, because guess what it has in the back of it? It has that specific aircraft weight, whoa, and balance record. So it has been weighed, it has been updated for that current aircraft, that specific aircraft. This is just generic. So as long as you don't change anything at all ever from the factory, this one's good. But that happens? No. So having that aircraft flight manual, that is, part of it is a POH. But anything that's changed has been added to this, so it is current and accurate for that aircraft. And within the back, usually, of the aircraft flight manual, they will put the aircraft weight and balance records that must go with that aircraft. And I went and I dug up 200 series actual physical paper maintenance manual, so I can hold it in my hand because it's always fun. And then AC 4313, what do you think this would help us with?
General guidelines.
Say again.
General guidelines.
Very good. General guidelines. Oh, and I heard some over here.
calculation.
Yes, calculations. How do you do these calculations? What formulas might you need? So, it tells you how to do weight and balance, how to comply with 14 CFR 4313, which tells us what we are responsible for as mechanics. And back to, what do you think you would find in the maintenance manual that's not in some of the other documents?
Check.
Yes. So in here will be jacking information, how to jack that aircraft up so then you can place it on scales. And it may have some other information, but that's those key information that will be in the maintenance manual that's not really in anything else. On the weight and balance records in the back of the means that it's no longer current, it has been updated, so you need to find the updated record. Any questions on those documents for now? We're going to go into each one of them in more detail throughout the class, but any questions kind of on what to find where? Okay. So, here are some of the pieces of information you're going to look for within those documents. And these are all things that have been established by the manufacturer. None of this is anything that you're going to try to figure out. So it's set, tested, and set in place by the manufacturer. So, maximum ramp or taxi weight, and I have the abbreviation at the end of each of these that you may see in the future. Will an airplane always have maximum ramp and separate, takeoff weight, yeah. So it'll have maximum ramp and a separate takeoff weight always, every aircraft? Yeah. What situation would they have separate weight?
If you burn a significant amount of fuel on the ground, that it would be beneficial to put on the extra weight of fuel burned on the ground.
So larger aircraft, airliners typically, that are going to burn enough fuel between startup and takeoff that it makes a difference. Our little airplanes, that's not a difference. Maximum landing weight, maximum baggage weights, and their location. Does it have nose baggage or tail baggage, or where is it? How many seats and their locations, certified center of gravity range, where the datum is, and leveling. So I am going to come to this little gal so that you can see what I see. Alright, so you are going to be diving into TCDS for your lab, but I will try It's not straight on here, actually. Alright, so if we go, first of all, now I think you worked with TCDS, is that correct? Really make sure that you have the correct one, you're in the most current, so always check your date. And then make sure you're not missing that it is for that specific model you're looking for, because it can be easy to misread. And then you're going to go down and make sure you find within the TCDS the correct one. So we want 210M, not just the first 210 they made. And look at all this stuff. No, I nicely highlighted it on my TCDS. So I found 210M, and it's got CG range, and that is different for different weights. Why do you think we have a greater CG range for a lighter weight?
Position in the aircraft.
Physics. Yes. Yes. Because the lighter you are, the more maneuverable you are. Yeah. Joe, did you have?
No, it's just. I was just gonna say at a lighter weight we can use our horizontal stabilizer, load it up more.
Yes. Perfect. Perfect. And then, empty weight CG range. What does that tell us, which we already know, about kind of the size of this aircraft? gonna change.
Well, you shouldn't.
So if we have an empty weight CG range, that means all of the options for people or baggage are gonna be pretty much in that range. Whereas if we do not have a range for empty weight CG, that means there's gonna be nose baggage, there's gonna be tail baggage, and as long as you are within weight and you calculate your CG that it's going to be within our loaded CG range, you're good. You can have a little weight in the back and a little weight in the nose. They're outside that range, but it all adds up. So your actual CG range is safe. So yeah, the empty weight CG range is for teeny tiny airplanes or helicopters. Yes.
Just to clarify for me, so with this range, it says none, but it actually means that whatever we do, we won't be going outside of that range.
No, correct, if it did have an empty weight CG range. If it said it was 42 to 53, but that means that you can't, it's not gonna have any options to load it behind or ahead of that. Maximum weight we have, and does this have a maximum ramp weight and maximum kickoff weight? They're the same. Yep. Number of seats, 6 total. What do you, has 2 at plus 34 to plus 46. What do you think that means?
Between those station numbers? Is that station numbers?
It is station numbers. Excellent. That's the arm of the seat. Why is it?
Seat rail.
Yes, seat rails. You can move your seat. So that's a pilot and passenger. They can move their seat the whole way forward to 34 or slide it back because they're very tall to 46.
Everybody slide back.
So that is something later this week when we do adverse checks to see if we load everything at the very back or load everything at the very front, what happens. Very important to take this into account. You want worst case scenario. Same thing for this one. 42 at 61 to 77. So center passengers, they can slide their seats. Poor back passengers, they're stuck at 101. They don't have sliding choices. Maximum baggage, reference, weight, and balance data. So now we have to go in here to find out what max baggage is. Fuel capacity, 90 gallons, 89 usable, and it tells you 2 45-gallon tanks in the wings at plus 43. But then you need to go to note 1 for any data you would want on unusable. Oil capacity, 10 quarts. What's this negative 12.5? Beautiful. That is the arm, and because negative, we know that's forward, the data. So, where do you think possibly, maybe, the data is? Firewall. I would think that. Yep, makes sense.
Well, I hope the oil is always forward of the firewall. Stay up there. It's not filling.
So another thing on the TCDS is this section. This is like so trippy because it is an asterisk. All right, there we go. Well, okay. Is going to the very back. So going past all the different models because it'll have engine data, all this at the very end. Finally, you get to data pertinent to all models. And here it has our datum, fuselage station 0, and look at that front face of firewall. Very specific. It's not the back side of the firewall. It's the front face of the firewall. And it tells you the leveling means. So baggage compartment floor, except for some certain serial numbers, on others it's the top of the tail cone, and others it is screws on the left side of the tail cone. So you really have to pay close attention to your serial number. coming out on the side, and they're usually pretty almost flush, so you just unscrew them a little bit and then set your level set. Ooh, yeah. So we found all of this information. How do you think the manufacturer actually develops all of this data? Right. So some of it is super smart engineers that do all kinds of calculations, formulas, but some of it is actual flight tests. So I have this video of the 747-8 doing some extreme testing. Cool. The pilot is like so chill. Like
Watching some of the extreme flight tests the new 747-8 freighter has been performing can make your heart skip a beat. In November, Boeing test pilots repeatedly dragged the airplane's tail on a California runway. The velocity minimum unstick test is designed to figure out the lowest speed the freighter can take off. As Captain Mark Firestein, the chief test pilot for the 747-8, will tell you, it is a difficult maneuver to pull off.
It's a balance between being forceful and being gentle. We want to be forceful to get the airplane's tail moving down towards the runway. But of course, we want to be very gentle when we set the airplane's tail down on the runway.
It was all force when the 747-8, loaded down with 1,005,000 pounds, soared into the sky. Well, since this flight in June, the airplane has broken its own record by taking off at 1,010,000 pounds. Right after takeoff and prior to landing, the issue of ground effects comes into play. So over several days in October, test pilots commanded the 747-8 freighter to basically hover over the runway. This examines the aerodynamic effects when the airplane is close to the ground. This test helps verify the jet's stability and control while gathering data for the engineering team to finalize the Autoland system.
Different weights of the airplane, different flap settings of the airplane, really understanding and simulating what the airplane could see in service.
10.27.25.
Once the airplane is in the clouds, the gravity-defying tests continue.
Recover.
In this clip from August, the pilots purposely put the freighter into a stall to make sure it can recover. And time and again, the airplane was up to the challenge.
In most of the stalls that I've flown, I merely relax back pressure on the column to neutral column, and the airplane recovers just fine.
You're cleared for kiss.
The pilots are also verifying the airplane can dampen out vibrations when they intentionally pulse or excite the wing and other control surfaces.
On left.
While the 747-8 freighter officially cleared flutter testing earlier in the year, the program continues to test for flutter as it refines the flight control laws.
You know, we've made significant progress in resolving the issues that we found during the flight test program. We have implemented fixes on the airplane, and we are now driving towards all of the fundamental testing that we have to complete to certify and deliver the airplanes.
The flight test program is about 2/3 of the way complete, as the 4 test airplanes have now surpassed 1,500 flight hours. The pilot, who has been in the flight deck for many of those hours, says it truly is an amazing machine.
If I had the chance to talk to a new 747-8 pilot, I would tell him, be excited. It's going to deliver on the promise of better efficiency, better performance, payload, and a quieter machine. But best of all, from a pilot's perspective, they're going to enjoy flying it.
Who wants to be a test pilot? So, yeah.
Or anybody who is crazy enough to want to do that.
So this guy, next guy. How many of you, I don't know if any of you have met Dwayne TCDS, and take note of this. This is what you'll find in the notes section. And you may very well be asked this later in a lab situation. What might you find under the TCDS notes? First of all, look for data pertinent to all models. Typically, that is where you will find the datum and the leveling means. And then the unusable residual fuel and oil, that may be under data pertinent to all models, or it may be under individual notes if it's different for different models, so that can vary a little bit. But that will be in the notes section typically. And also, under notes, you'll find variations in center of gravity range. So maybe if it has option to be a float plane or other options, you might see that information in the notes rather than them trying to cram it into the other section. Also, if there are removable ballast options, that would be down in the notes section. So that is, yeah, just be aware of that. If you're looking for information and you're not finding it in the main section of the TCDS, don't forget about the notes. It might seem like tackling in that very important information, but it is. Any questions on that? So when there is a new aircraft built, after it's built and painted, and if the pilot orders optional equipment from the factory, they may install that. They weigh it at the factory, and the manufacturer, develops an empty weight and balance and empty weight CG. They record that, do all the computations, and that is part of that aircraft specific delivery records and AFM. Brand new baby going to its new owner. With new aircraft, the manufacturer, they have an option. So they can actually put each individual aircraft on the scales and weigh it and record it. Or they can talk with the FAA and get approved to weigh an agreed upon percentage, typically that would be 10 to 20%, of a particular model aircraft, and then apply the average to all aircraft. So, if you're doing unique models, and not many of them, this won't apply, but Cessna makes a 172S model, and they're all exactly the same, have the exact same avionics, all the same equipment, and they're going to be super close to each other in weight and balance. So, if they weigh 10 to 20% or whatever they agree with the FAA on an amount of those aircraft, average that out, and then that will apply to every aircraft. So big manufacturers don't have to actually weigh every single aircraft within the same model. Once the aircraft leaves the factory, the requirements to re-weigh it is going to vary. So we'll talk about that. Someone give me a definition for standard empty weight.
The aircraft empty weight from manufactured original condition.
Excellent. Original condition after you drink it. And is that considered part of the empty weight? Yes, because you can't get it out. So with
Unusable fuel, would you find that type of skill that sheet?
yes, yes. So with the fluids in your aircraft, you do need to be very familiar with what is included in an empty weight and what is not included in empty weight. So included in empty weight are, it can be full or residual engine oil. I talked about that, but I'll have you review it again. So what kind of empty weight includes full engine oil? Basic. And what kind of empty weight says no oil? Licensed empty weight. Very, very good. And only unusable or residual fuel. So fuel needs to be drained for empty weight. But it does include full hydraulic fluid. So you want to be able to operate flat, operate landing gear. They are going to try to trick you. And instructors will try to trick you as well. But you will not be tricked because I'm telling you now, you may be given, and we're going to talk about how you figure out empty weight, but it may give you a scenario. We weigh an aircraft, the front main is 800 pounds, the front wheel is 800 pounds, the mains are 1,600 pounds together, and there was full hydraulic fluid in the aircraft. Would you need to do anything with that full hydraulic fluid? No, you don't care. It's like, oh, well, isn't that cute? Very nice. And figure out the problem. Also, if your engine has coolant, not too common, but if it does, that is a part of the empty weight. Things that must be drained or calculated for and subtracted and are not part of empty weight is usable fuel. So you either fill it up with a known amount and subtract that, or make it easier on yourself, just drain all the fuel and away. Anti-ice fluid, because you don't always need that unless you're flying icy conditions, not part of empty weight. Water injection fluid, and we would talk about, there's some uses in turbines, talk about that later, but not always needed. Potable water, do you know what that is? What kind of water that is? Drinkable water. Yep. So, who cares if your passengers want to drink some water? Not included. And lavatory fluid, not necessary for aircraft operation. So that must be taken care of, gotten rid of. So, if you were given a problem and it said you weighed the aircraft and it weighed 800 pounds on the front wheel, 1,600 pounds on the main wheels, after weighing, you discovered that there was 40 pounds of potable water on board. What would you do with that 40 pounds? Subtract it. But that wouldn't happen to you because you would check the aircraft before you weighed it.
So you're saying that I'm part of a team that's weighing aircrafts. You weigh. And I need to go to the bathroom. I shouldn't go into the aircraft.
You're right. They will be very upset at you. Any questions on what is excluded and what is included? And make sure you do know this. Yeah.
What about non-potable water? Like stuff that's counted in laboratory fluid?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, not really, but like
Right.
stuff that you just use for like.
Right, that is all part of that. They, for whatever reason, I mean, they are very separate categories. But, yeah.
How do you weigh laboratory fluid?
You just get rid of it. Yeah.
Windshield washer fluid?
4313, the weights that we will use for weight and balance class. Also, and these are standard, they're established weights for weight and balance. These are also what any calculation examples you see, particularly in prepware, they're going to use 6 pounds, so just use that for weight and balance class. Also, your textbook page 6-17 has same chart. Very curious thing that amuses me every year, and so far it has not changed. Crew and passengers. So they say an average person is 170 pounds, which makes me laugh. Because I think as we look at United Statesians, that's a very low average. But there is an advisory circular for the airlines that goes a little more into depth because airlines have to do weight and balance. And they have summer weights and winter weights. I wonder. So winter weights, they give more and then bring it back down for summer. So yeah, make sure you're familiar with this chart, know where to find it, know how to use it. Alright, it is time for a break. Come back at 07. 07.
You're bringing the thing down, we're going to a song. You know,
I think you better find that say podcast actually way weird. Where y'all find it? I've not seen it.
Right. That's right. Because I'm going more, like, I know I felt it, but I can see it. So I'm thinking,
Just we're going. First of all, if avgas weighs 6.2, then I'm almost like 90% of that off the 800.
right,
That's the first problem.
Right.
The second problem is water, we're bringing down to the hundreds.
right.
But we can't round up. Avgas is kind of like a huge deal.
Right.
You know, I'd rather round down hard.
Yes.
Okay. They give me a little complicated.
Yes.
Okay, I'll ask Ron.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you let the instructor know, and then you're like the average. Which one?
Is on the
Regular.
Okay. You can let either Kirk or Anna know. And I don't have that. Or Nick.
What do you think I've been doing? This is cool.
Oh, die cast. Let's go.
My thumb just read
Standard empty weight CG range.
because that's the one I have a pyro grenade on.
If I have an empty weight CG range, what does that tell me?
So that means that empty weight CG, it is weird. As long as your empty weight CG falls within that range, which is.
But
has to.
the empty weight is always going to be the same spot because it's empty. Like for every plane, right? That should be like in the manual
Right.
somewhere. This is where it is because it's empty and there's nothing affecting it.
Yes. So if it's given, and it kind of is confusing because it comes from manufacturing. But the main thing is if it has that range, the manufacturer's like, okay, that's a slight variation.
Second roll, I got a nat 1.
But it's not going to have, it probably will not have a loaded CG. And that means you can only load it within that
13.
empty weight CG. So you can't put any passenger or suitcase or anything outside of that. There's no baggage compartment forward or after that range.
Okay, so that'll be a pretty large range then that it would give for the like larger than your at normal like CG range, because then that's
20 for me.
right, because your CG range is pretty small. Like you're trying to get it in this sweet spot, right?
I'm not thinking about this. Sarah did that so private.
Yeah, so it would be almost a lot of and no baggage, so maybe
Okay, maybe like one thing that like I was on it and actually
yeah.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is where we went yesterday. I went in first. You know where the scariest place is to be? First. Well, that's because everything's jumping at you.
So, we've got our aircraft.
Yeah.
We're waiting.
I need that.
Sweet. We've got a lever action going on. We've got the center of gravity here. And we've got the center of lift here.
Right, so it's gonna want to go like that.
Well, he's gonna wanna
Right.
point down.
Okay.
Because this guy is slightly forward of our center of lift.
Right.
So what do we need?
Oh, okay. So you need tail weight,
We need a pulling action here.
which is usually done by your horizontal stabilizer a little
Now
down.
your horizontal stabilizer.
Or are they usually just pointed a little down? Is that?
Yeah, they're at a slight angle like that. Yeah. If you have a heavy weight, then you can only push this guy out so far, because now you're having to unload more and more hair,
Right.
which means your entire aircraft weighs more. But the lighter your aircraft is, the more and more you can afford to utilize this guy.
Because this guy, your horizontal stabilizer will only pull down so much.
Yeah. So the more you use your horizontal stabilizer to pull down, the heavier your entire aircraft gets.
Right.
Because the more this guy has to create lift.
That makes sense. Right.
So if you are dealing with a lightweight aircraft, well then you can just load this guy up.
Right.
But as you get heavier and heavier, you're gonna lose effectiveness.
Right. If it's a lighter aircraft, you can just rely on your horizontal stabilizer.
Yeah.
And if it's heavier, you need to like.
You're losing efficiency,
Right.
but you can.
You can do that, and then you'll need like ballast or like need to rework your loading or something.
Yeah, but
Otherwise.
yeah, you know, at the end of the day, you still want to bring your CG in as close as possible for efficiency. Well, she'll probably get into it. There's some give and take between efficiency and like stability and controllability. It's not always better to have center of gravity, center of lift right up on each other.
Yeah, actually, it's much less controllable, less controllable, more squirrely if they're exactly the same.
Right. I have heard that you want like. That makes sense. Yeah.
How's it going, Mr. Green?
Oh, that's going well, Mr. Matthews. How are you?
That's so
It's going pretty well.
Good. Well, now it just got a lot better. You know that. Thanks for remembering that. I was driving away and I was like, oh wait, I forgot.
So that's supposed to be for 2 weeks, but you gave me about twice what it cost me. So, you know.
Hey, he's generous like that. And then
I love how you grabbed it. Oh my god.
tell you a story
A person that got late.
about a student that was late coming back at break time. Except I can't. He would have been 21 yesterday.
Oh man. You got demoted.
Alright. Moving along.
Demoted that.
So, if you think I am repeating myself, it's because I am repeating myself, because I want you to know these terms upside down, backwards, so that you, when you're inverted in a pit, you still know what they are. So, if I get an aircraft right out of the factory, what kind of empty waste is that?
Standard.
Woohoo! Standard empty weight. Used by the manufacturer. Does not include any optional equipment that may be installed. So is standard empty weight very useful to us? So, which two are useful? What are the other two and how are they different? Basic. What's the other one? License. And how are they different? Basic has full engine oil, license, no engine oil, and what may they both have in addition to standard empty weight?
And all the optional equipment.
Optional equipment. So all three of these is unusable fuel. None of these contain fuel. These two have in common that they include optional equipment in addition to standard empty weight. And then basic has full engine oil, licensed only residual or undrainable.
Did you say last week that sometimes aircraft that were certified prior to 1978 will change their weighing characteristics, and they'll say, hey, we're a 77, but we're going with basic engine now.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And you're going to see that in the 414 they did that. As long as it is correctly documented in the weight and balance record, they can say, we now weighed it, we updated weight and balance to be basic empty weight. And then in the future, the mechanic's like, whew, much easier. I don't have a drain engine oil. Yeah.
Standard still includes hydraulic, right?
Correct. Yep. Hydraulic, full hydraulic fluid, residual fuel. Yes. So, let's say Mr. Joe Schmo brings you his airplane, and you need to determine, are the weight and balance records current? Do you need to reweigh it? Is the equipment installed? Has it been recorded? Do you have any idea how you would start to go about that process? Yeah. The logbook. Very good. How would you know what equipment is even supposed to be on that airplane? Equipment. So, you are going to use the aircraft equipment list to confirm required or necessary equipment, and then you can look and see what optional things you may have installed, and see what is supposed to be on part of the aircraft empty weight. This will be found in your aircraft flight manual or sales records with a POH, some combination of that. It used to be in the TCDS, but we talked about that's not useful. So they don't even put it in the TCDS anymore. So, I'll just show you the PowerPoint. So in here is the equipment list for the aircraft, rather than trying to show you on the document. I put it here. So, page in the POH, but you would go to the aircraft AFM to make sure it's for your specific aircraft. It's going to have a section titled Equipment List. Now, there's a So if it has a little R, that means it is required item for FAA certification. So if you see a little R at the end of an item and that item is not on the aircraft, what happens to the aircraft? Unknown. Sorry. Standard is from the manufacturer. It's going to come with that item, a standard equipment item. And O is for optional, that can replace required or standard. What do you think could be an example of that? Yeah. Exactly. So you could remove your steam gauges, put in a G1000. So updating avionics, as long as you have the correct replacement. And then A is optional equipment items, which are in addition to required or standard items. So what do you think could be an example of that? Might be a little harder to think of. Yeah.
A new alternator?
So that would actually be a new alternator. Would be
Or extra alternator for extra panel, for extra electrical power.
if you're allowed to do it, possibly.
Like a skull kit?
Yes. Yes. That would be very good. So optional, not required, not standard, but a skull kit. Yes.
So let's say you have a skull kit. I mean, that's obviously a big change in the way balance.
Correct.
That would all be, the STC would tell you how to do that.
If it is an STC. Some air, yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Is there any point where you have to weigh an STC yourself before installing it?
Possibly. It really
Or will
depends.
it always tell you?
Really depends. So most of them nowadays, they will tell you, this is the weight, this is the center of gravity, this is how you calculate it. Occasionally they won't, so you do have to reweigh the aircraft. But most STCs nowadays will tell you. For example, over at the LSC, they're putting in a preheater. So that would be an optional equipment. And that came with the STC that told them where the center of gravity was for that equipment they installed, and the arm and everything. So they did not have to recalculate. They had to calculate, they didn't have to reweigh the aircraft. Then, and so it tells you all how to read the equipment list. Tells you the weight will be in pounds, arm will be in inches. So if you forget that that is how the FAA does it for the United States, it reminds you right there. And here's something really helpful you might want to come back to. If there's a little asterisk, hard word to say, after an item, weight, and arm, it indicates a complete assembly installation. Some major components of the assembly are listed in the lines immediately following. And we're going to look at that. This is an important thing to note. The summation of these major components does not necessarily equal the complete assembly installation. Let's look at an example right here. So here we have wheel and tire assembly for the nose. And we've got a little asterisk. So that means underneath these three things are sub-assemblies of that. So the wheel assembly is part of it, the tire is part of it, and the tube is part of it. So the tire, tube, and wheel make up the wheel and tire assembly. So if you take that weight up here, 8.6, but if you add up the weight of the wheel, tire, and tube, that may not necessarily equal what they calculated as the final weight. So just be aware of that. If you're doing, let's say you're removing and installing equipment on an upcoming lab, just use the asterisk weight unless you're only removing one item. So just be aware of that. There are a couple of things. Oh yeah, make sure you're using the equipment list if you're doing this on an aircraft. change. So they had to put the battery way back in the tail to act as a form of ballast. And the 23 pounds was good for that. So just kind of a curious thing they did on that. And here, so this obviously has a little R, required, the engine required. And these instruments are standard, but they could be updated for something else. Here we have an optional battery that could be exchanged for the other one, and this is a heavy-duty battery. It's a little heavier, but it would be a perfectly acceptable exchange if you wanted a heavy-duty battery instead. And then we have what, anyone remember what the little A stands for? So optional or additional that are in addition to required or standard items. So we've got some fancy lights, a lot of fancy lights, some things down here, carb air temperature gauge, dual altimeters, yeah, extra, more fancy stuff. Yeah.
We have an assembly, a number of assemblies here.
Yeah.
Will the subcomponents sometimes add up to that total weight or never? Because I'm not seeing the numbers add up perfectly. Is that just because there's, you know, brackets and frames and whatever to
Right.
kind of put it all together?
Yes. Typically they won't add up. You may get a situation where it happens too.
Okay.
But yeah, typically it won't. Any questions on kind of how to use the equipment list? And I did point out that yes, here will be the weight for your item and the arm. So if you're looking to calculate, add it or subtract it from your empty weight, it would be, here's your weight and there's your arm. There's the numbers there. And we'll talk about how to use those, how to calculate those.
Is that in the, can you find that in the POH, or is that just?
Yes. Yeah, so in here it is.
To chapter, this section?
Right. Whoops. Ah, I got it. Right. Here we go. Here's an example of it in here.
Okay.
So yeah.
I thought it was.
Yep.
Thank you.
So in the POH, or make sure you have the AFM
For
for
the
your aircraft. Yeah. Yeah.
Is the reason why the total weight and everything a little bit heavier, they need like including hardware?
Yes, I would think so. Yep. Rather than, especially like a tire, if you're just taking out the tube versus replacing the whole thing. Yep. Your full assembly. Yeah. So with that, when you have your equipment list, how are you, don't overthink this, going to confirm that what is on the equipment list is on the aircraft? You kind of already answered this earlier.
Just look at it.
Exactly. Go out to the airplane and look at it. What radio does it have? What avionics does it have? What alternator, battery does it have? Now, hopefully, once you do that initially, then you're going to keep the light books updated and you don't have to worry about that, as long as you're the one working on the aircraft. But if it's brand new to you, first time, double check that stuff to make sure you don't get in trouble for touching it and then you don't report something. And,
The letters and numbers on there.
yes, like these here.
What do some of them mean? Like,
These are just
reference certain
items.
aircraft?
Yes.
Like item number?
Yes.
I wasn't sure if the first letter meant something more than C or G.
Not in regard to weight and balance.
Okay.
I'm sure for the manufacturer it does mean something.
Just a manufacturer designation
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah. So yes, take your equipment list, take your eyeballs to the aircraft, confirm what's on in the weight and balance at the back of the AFF.
Would you say double checking all this with the aircraft would be something required for inspection or specifically when we're doing weight and balance with it?
For weight and balance. Yep. Because what would you do? What document would you be looking at for to say this aircraft is airworthy? That it meets the TCDS. Yes, to make sure the engine is what's on the TCDS is. Right, it's like, yeah. But for weight and balance, when you're getting ready to weigh an aircraft, and you want to make sure the equipment is, yes, what it says.
Yeah, like a pilot and weight and balance. Double check.
Correct. No. No, every pre-flight you should be doing. Yeah, you need a 3-hour pre-flight, right? Alright. A little more review. Someone give me definition for center of gravity. Man. Beautiful. All moments equal each other. Any others?
Where the airplane will balance.
Yeah, so if you were to hang it from a string, where it would balance. Anybody else have anything else? Yeah.
Where all weight is concentrated in balance.
Where the weight is concentrated.
Center of rotation is
Ooh, center of rotation, where it's suspended. All of those. Excellent. Sounds to me like you have a very good working knowledge of center of gravity. So, point about which the nose heavy and tail heavy moments of the aircraft are exactly equal. Balance point, if suspended, have no tendency to rotate nose up or nose down. And we have different types of CG. We already talked about the empty weight CG. Is exactly what it says. Center of gravity in its empty weight condition. Empty weight CG range. We're going to talk a little more about that. That one can be a little confusing, but it means it doesn't have any options on the aircraft to load it outside of its empty weight CG range. So it probably won't have what is common, operating CG range, which means when you load the aircraft and then calculate the center of gravity, it must be within a certain range when loaded to operate correctly and safely. And here is, we have our center of gravity, and we'll talk about how that relates to center of lift, which are two different things. One's pulling down, the other is pulling up. We're talking about this, so empty weight center of gravity, balance point with no useful load. Make sure you remember this. The most important reason for weighing an aircraft, and it is recorded in the weight and balance record. So when we go out and weigh the aircraft, and then from that weight, you're going to calculate the empty weight center of gravity. It's an extremely important calculation. Must be accurate, extremely accurate, because that is what the pilot is going to base all of their calculations off of. Empty weight CG range. The next one, I have a picture of this, which I think will help you to understand it a little bit more. So it's the permitted range in inches. All of our stuff is in inches. And aircraft center of gravity may be located in its empty weight condition. If an aircraft is correctly loaded with regard to its empty weight CG range, it should not be out of operational CG range when in flight. So here is the picture. So just little tiny aircraft. So this is a Cessna 140, and here you see empty weight CG range is from 31 to 32, so very tiny, but any option is to have is a very small effect because we can go from, looks like 850 to, that's really fuzzy, just above 1,000, maybe 1,010 pounds. So not much weight we can even add. So that weight, because it has a very short arm, is not going to have much effect. So we have this empty weight center of gravity range. So here's the thing that you can do. This is empty weight CG, when empty weight CG falls within this range, computation of critical fore and aft CG position is unnecessary. And we're going to talk about doing those calculations later. Range is not valid for non-standard arrangements, so if you're not following the rules, then you need to do calculations. But this only has, the pilot can only sit here with the passenger, and there's hardly any baggage area behind it. So that is not going to pull the CG out of range. It is only for very small aircraft, very small helicopters, and typically it doesn't apply to the stuff that we fly. So if there is no empty weight CG range, it will say none. Any questions on that? When you calculate empty weight CG, the aircraft must be, when you weigh it, in level flight position. And someone remember why that is? Why do you have to make it level rather than sitting like that? That's how you fly. What else?
So then all the weight placement won't be the same. So if you, unless you keep it back at that straight level, your readings won't be the same.
Correct. So, well, yeah, the weight will be different. And what about arms? Right. So when you're at an angle, your arm you measure is going to be shorter. As you bring it up, it's going to be the correct. So must have it level, must have a standard, always. Anybody weighs it so that your arms are the correct distance from your data. So there are many different ways to do this depending on your aircraft. And where would you go for your jacking information? Maintenance manual. And typically, where will your leveling information be? TCDS. Now, it may also be in the maintenance manual, but not always. TCDS will always have your leveling needs. So, you may need to inflate or deflate landing gear struts and or tires. You're going to see on the 182 what we do. I'm not going to tell you yet, so you can figure it out. But you may, because typically our aircraft are going to sit a little nose high, so we have to deflate usually the nose, or if the mains are a little underinflated, fully inflate those to what the manufacturer says, don't overinflate them. And then you may need to put shims or blocks of wood under the main gear to bring it up to level flight attitude. Really nice thing about large aircraft is, we don't have these here because they're crazy expensive, but they can be measured by placing a load cell, which is super fancy little scale that will take the reading and the weight placed on it. Those load cells fit on top of the scales, or the jacks. They are little scales. So the load cells go on top of the jacks. You put them right there. You jack the aircraft up, and then once you can jack it. We've got 3 jacks going on here. Adjust the jacks until the aircraft is level. Take the reading. Super easy. Will it be that easy for us? No. But great opportunity for learning. But be aware, different places you go may have these and make life easy for you.
just simply like a, so that everything's done the exact same, it's like a
Yes.
template?
Yes, to keep everybody to the same standard, because the manufacturer and flight test people, they're testing it all kinds of, like, every configuration you can imagine with, yeah, the CG in the safe flight range. So they are testing it in all these weird ways to make sure when it's in safe, in the CG range, that you are making sure it's in level flight attitude, that it's also safe in its other ways. Does that make sense? Like, yeah, when you weigh it and calculate it, and it falls within the range of manufacturer states, they've already done the testing in nose high, nose low, yeah, every other weight aspect of it. Any other questions? Yeah.
In your book, when you're weighing a heavy aircraft, it's gonna have to, when you're landing gears, it's gonna be shocking a little bit.
Yes.
You're gonna be putting enough blocks underneath and it's gonna squat.
Yes.
Is there a way you can like lock them?
Yes, it is. Excellent. You are hopping ahead. But, so a very good thought process. Let's say you have a Cherokee aircraft that has oleo struts. Not like this. I did, on purpose. So, when you jack that up and take the weight off of those struts, they extend because they don't have weight on them. And then when you set it back down, it's going to settle. Poof. So, you either need to make sure you're ready for it to settle, and it settles evenly, or when it's extended, there are shims you can place in the struts, so then they are both the same length. So, yes, and we're going to talk about that when you weigh the Cherokee. Also, with weighing an aircraft, thinking about the laws of physics, what do you think is super important? Because, back to Amanda, think about where your center of gravity is when you are on the ground and you're forcing this into level flight attitude. What could go wrong with this situation? Could tip over. Because where is most of our weight? The engine. So you may need a ballast back here just to keep it safe. So we have weight down through this little sketchy looking stand. You would have something more secure than that. But you may need to have a ballast. What would you do with that temporary ballast if you have to have it in for safety? You would accurately weigh it and then subtract it. Yes.
Isn't there a situation here? It's like maybe years ago.
4 years ago?
That one that's
The yellow plane.
Now this one wasn't ours, but yeah. So they were, and the situation here, that's when I was lab assistant. So right after I had graduated, 4 or 5. Anyway, a number of years ago. And it was a good learning situation. So safety is very important when you are weighing aircraft and following the rules, following the safety protocols.
It kind of looks like he tipped over while the engine was running because the blades are
Yes, this prop blades are
rolled up.
I just found this
Yeah. It's
online yeah.
kind of
So yeah, it's very important to be aware of physics and gravity, because gravity is always going to try to pull your aircraft down. So now, I'm going to walk you through super basic process of weighing an aircraft, since I'm going to be referring to that. When we get to the place where we are weighing aircraft, I'm going to go into way more detail. But I want you to kind of have a working knowledge of what are the steps, so that when we're talking about this other stuff, we have something to reference. So you need scales. Some places have nice fancy scales that you can just roll the aircraft up onto. We do have aircraft scales, but we don't have these nice ramps, so we'll just strap the aircraft up, put the scales underneath, lower the aircraft onto the scales. And each of these scales will have a console. Now this one, there's a separate console for each scale. We have one console that has 3 readouts. So make sure, if you have 3 separate, that you know which cable goes to which scale. And that can get tangled up. Even on ours, one console, it can get confusing. So make sure you know what scale, or what console, or what reading is going to which scale. So you may have to go around and poke the scale, like, oh, which one do you get a different number? Okay, confirm, so you get the correct reading. And it is important that you center the aircraft on the scale, and do not have the parking brake on, because that can put a little bit of side load. So you want it as perfectly centered as possible to get an accurate reading that you can duplicate. Back to the scales. So these do need to be calibrated. If you go to AC 4313, page 10-10, that is where it says they should have a current calibration before weighing begins. And that'll be a lab later on where you will look at our scale console and see the calibration date. The manufacturer, depending on their scales, is the one who says when they should be next calibrated. So that's very manufacturer dependent. But they will tell you, calibrate at this date, you need to bring it back at this date. And also, before you place the aircraft on the scales, you need to zero out the scale so it's not taking any false readings. So zero it out and then place your aircraft on it. Then you'll take the readings and record those, because sometimes the scales blip out. It's very unfortunate times. So make sure you write down the readings. And what is it called if you have some shocks on you're gonna wait again, or somebody else comes along and waits it. All right. Israel. What FAA approved document gives leveling means to be used when weighing an aircraft? All right. How many agree with manufacturer's maintenance manual? Uh-oh. All right, let me ask you another question. How many of you are sleeping and don't even want to raise your hand? All right, thanks for your honesty. All right, does anybody say AC 4313?
Sleeping and don't want to raise your hand are two different.
Oh, yeah.
It's like an and/or type situation.
Does anybody vote for AC 4313? How does leveling mean? Okay, good. How many say manufacturer's maintenance manual does not work for that question? Why do you say that? Correct. Acceptable data. That's not FAA approved document. Yeah. Now, could the maintenance manual have the leveling means? It could. Will your maintenance manual always have the leveling means? They don't always. So, FAA approved document that will always give leveling means is the TCDF. Yeah.
Do you have to use FAA approved data? Or wait,
To get your leveling means, yes, you do want to use TCDF. The maintenance manual may guide, if you're like, wait, where are the little screws on the tail cone? What does that mean? The maintenance manual might guide you to that information. Thomas.
Yes.
To obtain, I can let you finish your note.
That's fine. Just writing.
To obtain useful weight data for purposes of determining the CG, it is necessary that an aircraft be weighed. Which one of those? Correct. In level flight attitude. Matthew. When calculating the new weight and balance for an aircraft, what is used to determine the operating CG range? And we've got a data plate, TCDF, or pilot information manual.
Good afternoon, previous question. How did I get the?
Excellent. And that is generally a very safe answer. So, TCDS. What is a pilot information manual? POH is a thing. The AFM is a thing. I'm not sure what they mean by that. So, yeah, TCDS. Go
Christina sanding just around the edges that she already did with paint stripper?
If there's still paint on it. I'm not sure how she masked it off.
Green paint.
Yeah. Good morning.
Hey, you didn't warn us.
Uh-oh.
Oh, it's pretty brutal.
About what? Oh, you're
It wasn't brutal, but it was a lot of
Yeah,
it was a lot of data.
Yes, it is a lot.
Yeah, so like we say here that they're drinking from fire hose. Had a couple of those
I
on
should have
us.
gave you a bigger warning.
No, it was really good. I enjoyed it.
Good,
So, yeah.
good. Rod said you got to play in a caravan?
What's that?
You got to work on a caravan?
No. We looked at it. They were actually troubleshooting at that time. They had issues. So he used that. What was going on? It was really good. And we need to sit down and look at. I would like to sprinkle PP6 through all the courses,
That'd be awesome.
like in physics. You know, we can do all kinds of things, and math, and other places too.
Yes. Oh, that's great.
I know exactly what's gonna happen.
Hey! Probably didn't go anywhere, but no, actually, that one did go somewhere. That's a fully controlled helicopter.
That's right there, man.
Oh, that was a great success. That's an actual fully operational. That's I can make it senior.
What?
That's like fully operational. It's like early 1920s, early 1960s. That's like 30s.
Those are right.
Welcome back.
Where were you?
Alright, gather in. Listen up. Sit down if you wish. Or you may stand. So we're starting a new slide PowerPoint presentation. So we don't have as much to plow through tomorrow. Same references. So we're going to talk about weighing requirements for some more review in there. Not do too many calculations today. I'll save that wonderful, exciting stuff tomorrow. But with weighing requirements, I want to hear from you. What do you think? So after the manufacturer weighs it, as many as they are required, and then they ship it to you, the owner, how often, what do you think is required to weigh an aircraft? Maybe per time, or is it per what you do to it, or whenever you feel like it, or after Thanksgiving, or yeah. Ooh, so equipment change, maybe. Maybe?
I know I'm biased to weigh our DC-3s every so much time.
So maybe if you're under certain operational rules, you may have to weigh.
Like, if you don't repair anything after so much corrosion falls off, the weight should like stay.
So maybe you don't have to reweigh. You don't.
Just after every major repair and things wrong.
Based on the category of aircraft.
Based on the category of aircraft. Any other thoughts? Let's say I buy a 172 think, and I like the avionics that are on it, I don't update it. Let's say I have that for 50 years. Do you think I should reweigh that at any point?
You said if you're a commercial operator?
No.
Oh.
No, I'm not. I'm just doing it for basically private pilot privileges. Well, I don't even really have to go over these next slides because you just hit it. It would be a good idea, but you don't have to. But there are, if you're a certain operator, yes, you do. So you've got the right idea. Very good. So there is no FAA requirement for the reweighing of small aircraft that are owned and operated privately. So small and private, there's not a requirement. There is, however, a requirement that the aircraft must always have a current and accurate weight and balance record. So, if your AFM with the weight and balance record in the back gets hijacked and burnt or missing and never found, then the only way to create brand new records is to reweigh and recalculate that weight and balance. So, if your report is lost, destroyed, or stolen, then you do have to reweigh the aircraft to meet those requirements. If the aircraft equipment has changed, so like some of you were saying, a new weight and balance report must be created. Now, this can be done two ways. So to get a new weight and balance, you can reweigh the aircraft, put it on scales, do the whole reweigh thing. But, like the preheater they're putting on, or even a lot of avionics updates, the STC equipment will come with your weight and balance data. So it will say it weighs this much and the arm is this many inches, so you can mathematically calculate it, and you don't need to actually physically reweigh the aircraft as long as you're doing accurate mathematical calculations. Now, over time, the aircraft does tend to gain weight. So, therefore, it is a good idea, even if you're private and small aircraft, it's still a good idea to reweigh every so often, every couple of years, just to make sure it's not getting too fat. Yes?
When something corrodes, turns into rust, is rust heavier than the element that it was before? Or does it stay the same?
I don't know. That's a very good question. You should do an experiment on that. Let something corrode away. If you're doing good cleaning and corrosion, and then clean the corrosion away, now it's maybe reducing weight a little bit.
Go back to the previous slide for just a second.
Yeah. Mainly, yeah. No requirement debris accumulation in the airframe structure. Now hopefully you're doing a really good cleaning job and you don't have giant nasty nests stuffed in your airframe. But there is dirt, stuff that can accumulate that is hard to get out, so you just, that's a good idea to reweigh. Which one of these do you think would be considered the major source of weight change for most aircraft? Correct. So alterations and repairs are the major source of weight change. Because this one, hopefully you're keeping it clean. This, or typically like exchanging equipment, that's not gonna necessarily add up. But alterations and repairs, they start to add up a lot over time. So, here is my question for you. How large of a repair, how large should a repair be before you need to do weight imbalance or reweigh the aircraft? Let me start out with this. Let's say you do that circle patch repair that we did in drawing class for a 1-inch hole. Do you think you would need to reweigh the aircraft for that? I got one. Let's say you do 5 of those circle patch repairs because you've got bullet holes in your airplane. So 5 of those circle patch repairs, would you need to do?
Depending on how much it weighs, because in the front of this nice chapter, it says if it's less than 5,000 pounds, it needs to be 1 pound or less. And then if it's over 5,000 pounds, it's 2 pounds or less.
I should have known this. You guys are the advanced class. You already figured it out. So, in AC 4313, page 10-1, at the beginning of this chapter, it gives you guidelines. So, go to 10-1. It gives you the definition of negligible weight.
Reweighing requirements, does that mean we have to update the weight balance, or does that mean we have to actually put it back on scale?
It means you have to update the weight balance. So, with any alteration or repair, if you know the exact location and the weight, you can calculate it. If it is a big repair and it's really hard to calculate center of gravity, the arm, then you may need to reweigh it. So it really depends what it is. But if you're able to calculate it, that's obviously the easier option. So, negligible weight change, AC 4313, chapter 10, page 10-1. So, if it is considered negligible, you are not required to reweigh or even calculate the weight imbalance. Now, is it, let's say you put in a little radio that is considered negligible. Would it be a good idea, if you have the weight and arm for that, to go ahead and calculate it? Definitely, because those alterations are the things that do add up over time, if they're less than a pound. So it's still really good to calculate it, however you are not absolutely required to. So negligible weight is 1 pound or less for an aircraft whose empty weight is less than 5,000 pounds. And then it goes up, so 2 pounds or less from 5,000 to 50,000, 5 pounds or less, more than 50,000, you do not have to memorize that at all. Just know there is a negligible weight which will increase as your aircraft weight.
If I make 2 different alterations at different times, but they come together to be like 2 pounds of difference,
Right.
am I required to make that?
So this is like one at a time. So let's say I'm flying, get a damage, do a repair. Then 6 months later, oh, I find this other, I do another definition of weight. But yeah, the downward force of gravity acting on the mass of an object. Ounces, pounds, tons, kilograms is how we measure that. And in weight and balance, what is our most common unit?
Pounds.
Pounds. All right. Next definition. Describe for me balance.
Equalization of two weights, maybe?
I like that. Equalization of two weights. Any others? That's pretty good. Oh, yeah.
It'd be maybe more equal moments.
Ooh, I like that.
You have to have the distance of the moment or from the moment.
Equal moment. Ooh, perfect. So, an even distribution of weight, enabling an object to remain steady or stable. Therefore, can someone give me a definition of imbalance? Exactly. Yep. So just switch out. And make sure everybody's getting caught up. Imbalance is just an uneven distribution of weight, inhibiting an object's ability to remain steady or stable. So we've had 100 pounds back here, evenly at the same distance from our fulcrum, and now we went and plopped, bam, 200 pounds. Uh-oh, we are out of balance. So all the things we're going to talk about is keeping our aircraft in balance with its CG. Someone define for me component arm. Not my arm.
Can you go back?
Yes.
The distance between an object with datum.
Excellent. Excellent. Distance from the datum to the center of gravity of a component. The horizontal distance in inches. And it is important that you keep in mind this is to the center of gravity of a component, not just to the front end of it. It's wherever its center of gravity is located. And in front of the datum, is that going to be a positive or negative arm? Negative. And after the datum, is it going to be positive or negative? Excellent. So, positive, aft, negative, ahead or forward of the datum. Boom, boom. And if a manufacturer is kind to us, where will they place the datum?
On the aircraft.
So it's really nice if they put it on the nose, because then what does that make all of our arms? Makes them all positive. So now I don't have negative, blah, blah, blah. It's all positive arms. If they put it out here somewhere, it makes it tricky to measure from the datum. But it's very doable, but you will be doing it. So, another term, yes.
For the datum locations on the AC 4313, it does say any convenient distance.
Yes.
So even though we think the engineer's being really mean, it's a convenient distance, we just don't know it.
Thank you. So, for your information, it will be convenient. And according to whoever wrote AC 4313, they thought it was convenient. Okay. So, yeah.
So measuring from their set datum, are we able to, let's say, move it to something more convenient for us, and then just add or subtract the number?
No, because that would start to add not necessarily an aircraft. So if you see lever arm, that means specifically from the fulcrum, not from the datum, from the fulcrum to the component. So lever arm, just physics, fulcrum. Component arm, what is actually practical from the datum that we're dealing with in real life airplane weight and balance.
Now, would it be fair to say that the lever arm is the distance from a component to the CG? Is that sort of like our
Correct.
fulcrum?
Yes. Because the CG is our fulcrum. All right. So here's our datum at the firewall, and what will be unique about our arm aft of the firewall, and what will be unique about our arm forward. Very good, very good. Why do you think I'm hammering this into your head?
It's important.
It's very important. And people tend to get this mixed up. Yeah.
So we're talking a lot about forward and aft weight and balance.
Yeah.
What about side to side, like in the wings?
Right. So it will still, typically in airplanes, it's not going to have that much of a factor. Helicopters it very much will. And we're going to talk about that. Lateral CG is calculated on helicopters, but not for airplanes.
Gotcha.
Joe, did you have any questions? So with a component arm, and we had looked at this a little bit, the arm of each item will be included in parentheses right after the item. So here we had the seats, we had already looked at this in the other TCDS, and it will give you a plus or minus, and that is telling you that component arm from the datum. And if the arm of a specific piece of equipment is not known, then you do have to go out and measure it and find the firewall and then physically measure it, which can be pretty tricky because there's lots of stuff in the way. So thankfully, most of the time, it will tell you. And someone proing it today. So you're going to have, and if it helps you to set up this chart, you're going to have all your weights in nice column, and then all your arms in a nice column, and then the next one will be that weight times that arm will equal that moment. So to set up this chart, you can say wham! Weight times arm equals moment. So wham helps you remember how to lay out this chart. You can remember that. So you would add up all of these weights, get your total weight, and then add up all of your moments or the effect that that weight has. And then the magic number, you take all of your total moments, divide by all of your total weight, and that will give you the center of gravity for your aircraft. We're going to do lots of practice on that. I just wanted you to see the nice, pretty little chart. It's very important that you keep your negatives and positives very carefully. And then when you calculate your moments, you keep those negatives and positives, and you are, on your handy little calculator, which I did not bring with me, you are putting these in as negative. You're subtracting those. You are adding those. Very important, or you would get a really wacky way off center of gravity. So it's very simple math. Also very easy to make a mistake, because it's easy to, oops, forget my little negative sign. So just take your time when you're working these problems. Question on that. We're going to have lots and lots of practice. I wanted to bring this chart up, and this is on 6-4 of your textbook. I just wanted to talk about it so that you don't get confused with it. So here is an example of the airplane they're talking about. Our datum is about at the firewall. So if we are adding weight, and I talked about this Friday, adding weight after the datum, we're going to have a positive moment. If we're adding weight ahead with a negative arm, then we end up with a negative moment. Taking weight away after the datum, negative moment. Taking weight away ahead of the datum, positive moment. So you can kind of see if we have a positive moment, we're going to have nose up tendency. Negative moment, nose down tendency. Do you think this chart is always, for every situation, accurate? Correct. It's not. In what situation would this not necessarily be accurate? Exactly. So, if you have an aircraft like this, the datum at the nose, you're going to, this won't be accurate anymore. So just keep that in mind. I don't know if you want to make a note by that little chart. That's not always and forever true. Don't get locked into that chart. It's nice because on our aircraft, most of, especially Cessna, they will put the datum at the firewall. That's not always true, so don't take that chart as always forever true. It's just helpful with the datum at the firewall. Okay. uh-oh, we are not, what is the word? Balanced. We are imbalanced. So, to figure out what would bring us in balance, you have to make your moments equal. So, if 100 times 100, our moment is 10,000, here we have to move our 200-pound weight so that we have a 10,000 inch-pound moment. How would you figure out how close to move that?
10,000 divided by 200.
Exactly. A little bit of algebra to reverse the process. 10,000 divided by 200 will give you your arm. And what would that be? Perfect. Any questions on that? They love to ask you stuff like that. And they will give you this information, and then they will say, how far, where do I need to move my weight so that I have equal moments? And here is another one. If we have 700 pounds at 90 inches, look at that. You can have 900 pounds at 90 inches. So lovely. And, oh yeah, okay. So what would our moment be?
I don't know. Suspicion 63,000.
No way.
No way.
So, you can see we can have different, even if we flip-flop, still the 63,000 inch pound. Now it's your turn. I have a 20-pound aircraft battery at 84 inches. Who's the first one? Quick on the numbers. Oh, oh. I got a 1680. I got agreement. Beautiful. 1,680. Very good. Now, 20-pound battery, 34 inches from the datum. What's the moment of that battery? Ooh. Ooh. Tricky, tricky. And now do this. 34 inches forward of the datum. So you could do perfect math, but forget that forward of data means negative, so that is negative 680. All right. Do you think those are simple calculations? Good. I agree. also in the AFM and the maintenance manual, but the TCDS is the master. And yeah, we talked about that. There's no rule. It says where it belongs. That's up to the manufacturer and how much they like it. Now, with the datum, and here is the datum, and then leveling means another example in data pertinent to all models, which would be found about where in the TCDS?
Notes.
Yep, just before the notes, very end. It is very important to pay close attention. So this one says front face of firewall for certain serial numbers, or lower face of firewall for other serial numbers. So this is an example of a nice flat flush firewall. So anywhere you measure is going to be the same. This one, it may be a little bit hard to see, but it goes up and then in and then up again. So they changed that on Cessnas from that serial number to that serial number. So that's why they specify lower front face. So it's this lower portion, it sticks out further. So really pay attention to where it tells you that the datum is, and be especially careful of tricky datum. Yeah.
So those, since the first firewall is flat, you can just measure both from the lower front face, right?
Correct. Yep. Yep. But yeah, why don't, yeah.
Do you have like enough STCs or alterations and stuff on an airplane that you changed it enough from the TCDS? How do you go about with this? Like, 'cause then all those calculations probably, like your CGs and everything that's in like, in all that.
So, are you talking about the CG range might change, or?
Yeah, or like even maybe your maximum taper.
Yeah.
Does that change
Yeah.
anything? If you like add 2 inches to the wing.
Very much so. And we're going to look at that on our 206 on the flight side. It did change because they added tip tanks, and I think, I forgot they strengthened the gear a little bit. But with the stole kit and some other modifications, it did raise the maximum takeoff weight. And it also changed the CG. So that is why you have to go, and the 414 really had that also, which is why you had to go to the aircraft flight manual and check that just to make sure, is this really how it came from the manufacturer. So yeah.
And if it is changed, where are you gonna find the new? Do you have to calculate the new?
It will be in the weight and balance records. They do have to document that, yes.
Okay.
And typically that would come with STC. That's not something you would have to figure out. Like the STC would say, when you install this, it will have this arm at this CG, and it will change your weight to 3,800 pounds or something like that. It would tell you all that. And then you would put that into the calculations, but you don't have to like do the flight test or figure out, oh, what is my new CG? Another thing to watch out for is where the datum is located. So on Pipers, there was a year where they modified their wing. So this one, you have this little inboard portion, but then it's straight out, parallel to each other. This one, right about there, it's straight here, but then it kind of tapers. So for straight wing, datum was 78.4 forward, a wing leading edge. So you had to measure from the leading edge forward to find your datum, which is interesting. But for this model, it's 78.4 forward of inboard intersection of straight and tapered section sections, so that's like right here, where it starts to taper.
Hard to see.
It is hard to see, but just be aware to really make sure you have the right serial number. Yeah.
So they couldn't use the nose because it was a different distance for both models, or why use the name instead of
That's what the manufacturer used. Maybe the cowl wasn't considered a really stable, permanent structure. Maybe they changed the cowl more often than they changed the wing. Yeah. Oh yeah, highlighted that. Some examples of some datums. Helicopters, typically they like the mast because that's a fixed point. And it could be a nose, it could be the forward leading edge of the rotor as it's at a specific position. And large aircraft, typically they will put those on or ahead of the nose just because you're doing tons of calculations on airliners. So most often that will be ahead of the nose. And fuselage stations, another word for station numbers, measured in inches. It'll always be inches in the U.S. from the datum. Positive aft, negative forward. Is this the 528th time? No, I think it's the 453rd time I said that. And just an example of station numbers, which I think you're already familiar with, but from the datum plus ahead of the datum negative. Yeah.
Was that PlayStation?
Fuselage station.
Fuselage station.
Yeah, and you will see it abbreviated like that, FS for fuselage station.
So if you have station numbers, they're inches, right?
Correct.
So if the manufacturer would mark them on station numbers on a spot, would you be able to measure from station number, find where you are? Would that be a good practice?
You can, depending what it is. Yep. And for you're going in flight controls class, you'll be measuring station numbers on the wing to look at wing foots and stuff, and it will tell you this rib is the station number. It might say the center of the baggage compartment is a certain station number. It will tell you, and you'll do this when weighing an aircraft to find the center point of your wheels. It will tell you your wheel station number is such and such. So, yeah, you will. Okay, any questions? We're going to stop there as far as lecture. So take a break, and then when you come back, we'll go over the lab for today. So come back at 10:00.
have your book.
It's weird that
Take
that's
this unlimited time.
just be doing notes. Why should be just he's like, it's from where. So what you're trying to say is
Can't take a not and insert it in every other question to make things Christine secretly knows the answer to this question.
I know. Oh, well, what do you think?
I was only late about 5 minutes one time, so that's why I was wondering, because I think I got clocked in for Kurt's class
Okay.
this week.
So, and did you scan your face?
I tried, I talked to Barb, she wrote it down.
Oh, good, good. So, she wrote it down, and Angie will give you the paper at some point, put it in your mailbox, and then whenever you're here, because you had to make the time in 2 minutes. So, even if you're 5 minutes late, you're gonna
So usually you just wait till you get paper and then.
You can, or like if you stay late today, let Nick know, because he should be staying there, and then he can do it. If you just keep track of it, I'll send a piece of paper. Then when you get the paper, you just go ahead.
Very, very, like, they're very, big engine, very, like, and good brakes, really good brakes. Slow as you go.
Yeah.
still on there. That's still on there.
Okay, I saw a green one on social media that I found on here. Also, like, never actually used. Because why not? My grandparents listened to it.
Rallying that thing.
Dude,
I won't make a rally car like that.
classic, like,
I won't make a rally car like that. When you take the chassis, you take the body off of it, you'll be right here.
yeah. No, that was sick.
Alright, I will go over your lab that I just opened up. Lab numero dos. I once had a Spanish class which I did not develop. So, if you go into lab 2, and you are given a good warning upon PCBS information. This information section is very, very important. If you do not gather all the information, you will probably be crying. So, make sure you get the most current PCBS for the Cessna 206. And we were very kind to you. We gave you the TCS number and the revision number, making sure, which they just changed it. And when I was prepping for this class, like, let me double check that PCBS, and indeed, they did update it. So, I had to go through all the questions again, make sure nothing was changed. I did not find anything changed.